All right. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon and good morning, depending on where you are. And thank you for taking the time to join us today as we continue our 2024 webinar series. My name is Tina Barr, and I'm the Director of Training and Education for the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement, or NACOLE. NACOLE is an organization that works to create a community of support for independent civilian oversight entities seeking to make their local law enforcement, jails, and prisons more transparent, accountable, and responsive to the communities they serve. One part of that effort is our webinar series. Since 2015, NACOLE has worked to bring you information through our webinars on effective practices in civilian oversight, innovations in the field, and efforts to reform the criminal legal system. Before we begin the webinar, I'd like to go over a few logistics. First, everyone has the ability to turn on the captions by using the caption button at the bottom of your screen. Given the large number of audience members today, everyone has entered the webinar in listen-only mode. So while the chat feature is not available to the audience, the Q&A feature is on. At any point in time, if you have a question for the panelists, you may type in your question using that feature. However, to ensure that the panelists have enough time to get through their prepared remarks, they will answer questions at the end of the webinar, unless there's a question that seeks clarification about something being spoken about in the moment, and it would be helpful to respond to that question right away. Please note, you do have the ability to upvote questions by clicking the little thumb icon beside each particular question. If you upvote questions, that moves it closer to the top of the queue of questions, and so the panelists can respond to questions that are most pressing, given the limited amount of time we have today. To allow for more time for questions and direct engagement with the panelists, immediately after the webinar, we will have a 30-minute discussion with the speakers. And so maybe about 10 minutes before the end of the webinar, I will provide you all with the link to the Zoom discussion room. I will drop it in the chat for the audience. And so please be on the lookout for that if you would like to attend the 30-minute discussion afterwards. Finally, as a reminder, today's webinar is being recorded and it will be available to registrants for 3 months. About 3 days or no longer than 3 business days after today's webinar, you'll receive an email with instructions on how to record, to access the recording, as well as a copy of the PowerPoint slides that will be used today. Okay, so now, having spoken or given you the logistics, some of the housekeeping items, I'd like to move everyone's attention to the webinar itself. So as you can see, the webinar is entitled Bridging the Gap Beyond Oversight, using the intersection of policing and social justice to strengthen stakeholder relationships. Our speakers today are members of the Community Outreach, Training, and Education team of the City of Philadelphia Citizens Police Oversight Commission, which I will refer to as CPOC. They have designed a presentation that encourages oversight practitioners to consider policing as one cog in a wheel of community concerns and to consider a community's needs that land outside of oversight's purview, which can enhance community trust. This webinar aims to educate and empower oversight practitioners to use and leverage pre-existing connections and credible messengers in the community to have a greater impact on the residents they serve. Additionally, this presentation will encourage oversight practitioners to create meaningful community engagement opportunities that include topics and subjects that go beyond the scope of policing and law enforcement. These objectives will be accomplished by discussing the work of CPOC within the context of the City of Philadelphia overall, by focusing on the history of policing and oversight in Philadelphia and the complex issues and concerns that residents face, CPOC's role and mission, and an overview of police misconduct complaints and concerns that lead to constituent service requests, and an overview of CPOC's creative and innovative outreach and engagement efforts that often involve partnering with community stakeholders to amplify the voices of underserved community members. Turning to our speakers today, Talia Renee Grimmage is the Director of Outreach and Constituent Services for CPOC, where she started as a policy analyst in 2019. Talia is a Philly native who has always had a passion for social justice and community outreach and believes that one of the best ways to create change in policing is to speak truth to power and listen to the voices of the underserved and over-policed. In addition to taking leadership courses and training in executive management, she obtained a BS in paralegal studies from Pierce College and is currently pursuing a graduate degree in organizational leadership. Prior to joining the CPOC family, Talia worked as an investigator and senior investigative analyst for the City of Philadelphia Office of the Inspector General and as a case manager for the Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit. Damon Green is the training and outreach manager at CPOC and originally joined the office as a police auditor monitor. Prior to joining CPOC, Damon worked for the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission and has extensive experience as a probation and parole officer in Philadelphia, supervising high-risk young adults. Damon is academically trained as a public historian with expertise in race, gender inequities, civil rights, social and political movements, and governance. He uses historical analysis and thinking to address contemporary issues in policing, police community relations, criminal justice reform, and other various sectors. Damon received his MA in history from Eastern Washington University, a BA in communications from Temple University, and a BS in business administration from Pierce College. Julian Jordan joined CPOC as a community outreach and constituent services specialist in 2022 and is most eager to develop programs that re-engineer and strengthen the Philadelphia Police Department's relationship with the Philadelphia community at large. Julian looks forward to forging new relationships with community organizers, activists, and leaders whose individual and collective visions will ultimately enable CPOC to live up to and create an impact beyond its own mission. Julian studied real estate management and development and entrepreneurship and innovation at Drexel University and served on the university's anti-racism task force following the murder of George Floyd in 2020. Giriana Hernandez joined CPOC in 2024 as a bilingual community outreach and constituent services specialist. She has a strong background in victim advocacy and juvenile justice and joined the CPOC team to bridge the gap between the Spanish-speaking community and law enforcement. Giriana holds a BA degree in criminal justice and minor in French from Arcadia University. Her background in victims advocacy gives her a unique perspective on policing, and she uses her lived experiences to engage with victims and survivors, community stakeholders, and members of law enforcement. So to each of our panelists, I thank you for taking the time to join us today and your willingness to be a part of NACOLE's 2024 webinar series. I will now turn things over to the panelists.
Thank you for those, excellent introductions, Tina. Appreciate that. And good afternoon and good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today to discuss interesting and a very important topic. And so as we get started, one of the most profound statements that informs a lot of the work that we do at CPOC is that if you want to understand today, you have to search yesterday. Pearl S. Buck, American novelist. And so what does that quote actually mean? Well, it actually means that as policing has evolved historically regionally, so does the interventions to improve and correct the operations of our local police departments must also be looked at regionally. And so, of course, we have to search the past to get a better understanding of not only how we got here to this point, but some of the various factors that created the things that we are dealing with today. So what does that mean? That means understanding a community's history and relationship with the local police department. It's vital in our efforts in creating equitable policing practices, policies, and working to build that relationship between the police and the community. Next slide. And so when we look at the history of policing in Philadelphia, it's similar to a whole lot of different areas throughout our nation, but also very different. When it comes to police oversight, there's always been a need for intervention from the community in regards of improving policing practices here in Philadelphia. But we see a theme occurring Throughout the years, police oversight, civilian police oversight here in Philadelphia has had many names, starting off as the Police Review Board during the 1950s, later on in the 1990s, becoming the Police Advisory Commission, and now currently, as it stands now, as the Citizens Police Oversight Commission. But as we've noticed, throughout this opportunity for change to occur, there's always been different forms of incidents that has created the opportunity for change. And usually those incidents come in the form of some type of police brutality that has affected the most marginal citizens in our area. Next slide. And so here, as we move forward in our presentation, we're going to just see a snapshot of the history of modern police community relations here in Philadelphia. Next slide. And so the idea of civilian police oversight is not new. It's not really a recent phenomenon. It starts even back earlier to the turn of the 20th century, where we find that there were great incidents of issues of concern when it comes to civil rights and issues concerning police brutality, especially as a great deal of African Americans started to move north and west during the Great Migration. And so here we find this is an early editorial cartoonist from the Philadelphia Tribune, dated May 10th, 1928. And what we notice here, depicted in this cartoon, if everyone pays attention, is that there are some, issues with locals in the neighborhood, maybe some hostilities towards African Americans in that particular neighborhood. And we see on the side here, the police being ambivalent to what's going on. So historically, we are keenly aware that the issues of policing inside of some of our most vulnerable neighborhoods oftentimes have battered between over-policing and under-policing. And so this cartoon by the Philadelphia Tribune, which is a Black newspaper that started here in Philadelphia, we see that type of dimension early on, starting in the late 1920s. Next slide. Here further, as we move forward, once again, from the Philadelphia Tribune, June 29th, 1957, we have multiple reports of police misconduct here. Here you have the harassment of individuals of different age groups, whether it be young people or our elderly people that have been engaged with interactions with our local police department. And it proved to be very difficult, problematic. And if you notice a theme here, is that the people that is reporting this information is local Black newspapers. And unfortunately, historically, if you understand the news media and the coverage of these types of issues, the more mainstream forms of communication, the more mainstream newspapers didn't really pay attention to what was going on in the neighborhood. So this precipitated the creation of newspapers and Black newspapers to keep these types of issues at the forefront of everyone's mind, so that we can understand what is going on here, not only in the city, but into similar areas where these types of newspapers were prevalent. Next slide. Here we have 1960. We have a protest going on surrounding Philadelphia City Hall. And what happened in this incident was that there was a police officer that was operating in North Philadelphia. Officer involved shooting, and he discharged his weapon as he was going after an unarmed assailant. And upon discharging his weapon, he killed one other bystander along with the assailant that the officer was chasing, and also wounded others. And so here in this photo, we see people protesting outside of City Hall. if anyone's familiar with City Hall, it's a large building that's intersects some of the major sections of the city, the major streets of the city, Broad Street and Market Street. And these are vehicles that are driving around City Hall in protest, being accompanied by other individuals who are walking around City Hall in solidarity with their protest signs. Next slide. Here, another pivotal moment in Philadelphia history was the racial unrest of 1964. There was a racial unrest once again in North Philadelphia, and we see the activity of officers addressing that. And if you notice, as we move forward in time, how the demographics of the officers may start to change, but nonetheless, as we understand institutional policing, and the problems that come from that is that it's less about the individual police officers and their behavior, and oftentimes more about the victims that are involved. So you can change out the race and other demographics of the officers, but institutionalized, there's always been some sort of issues. Here we have 1967, we had former Philadelphia Police Commissioner Frank Rizzo. And here again at another protest, that's Mayor Rizzo, who also was the Philadelphia Police Commissioner at the time, over there in the far left-hand corner. In this incident, there was a protest by local Black Philadelphia high school students who wanted, this was a period of late 60s, who wanted a curriculum that was more infused with Black history. And they left Benjamin Franklin High School here in Philadelphia, and they were met with a contingent of police officers who started to arrest many of the students and unfortunately engaged in misconduct that was very problematic, to say the least. Next slide. Here we have another angle of the protest. We have a student becoming arrested as well. And so as we move forward in time, there's always been issues that has precipitated and has encouraged the need for police oversight here in Philadelphia. And so when we are addressing those types of issues and tensions in our communities, we have to realize that there is like a base understanding of tension that's going on in the community. And so we just can't have a moment where we just address the here and now. We have to understand and articulate what came before us historically in regards of the issues concerning the police in our community. Next slide. Here you see same picture of the protests in regards of the high school students, where you have officers engaged in dispersing students from the protests and taking them away. Here, another important aspect of Philadelphia history happened in May 13th, 1985, where we had the Philadelphia Move bombing. And I'm sure, as most are familiar with, is that this is probably the only incidents of an American city being bombed officially by the edict of the mayor and the police commissioner in order to deal with a hostage crisis and other types of issues at the time. And so we have onlookers here that are seeing the aftermath of the bomb being dropped out in West Philadelphia. And here we have the aftermath of the damage that had occurred. About 2.5 city blocks were destroyed. About 13 people lost their lives in the fire, including young children who were part of the Move family, and a limitless amount of trauma that's going on here at the end and the conclusion of this terrible incident that involved the Philadelphia Police Department dropping an incendiary device on the roof of this particular residence. And so as we look through civilian oversight here in Philadelphia, as I stated, we start to see a recurring theme. we start to see how in 1958, Mayor Dilworth established the Police Review Board by executive order. The local communities, specifically the Black community, were advancing, and they were working towards really putting a great deal of pressure on Mayor Dilworth to address the issues that had long been ignored. And they were doing that not only through their social movements and their political actions, but also through their other grassroots efforts during that time leading up to the 1960s. 1967, a local judge here in Philadelphia ruled that the creation of the board was illegal. And then in Pennsylvania in 1969, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court reversed that decision. But as with executive orders, whether on a local, state, or federal level, they can be quickly abolished. And so that's what happened with the Police Review Board in 1969. With a one-sentence order, the next mayor, James Tate, abolished Police Review Board and civilian oversight until we move forward in our timeline to 1993, where Mayor Ed Rendell worked to veto another creation of civilian police oversight here in Philadelphia, but he did not have the votes to override. And so in that case, leading forward to 1994, the Police Advisory Commission was established to improve community relations and investigate individual civilian complaints against police. And in 2017, Mayor Kenney signed an executive order to give new powers to the Police Advisory Commission. Next slide. But as with a lot of the civilian police oversight agencies that we have today, sometimes we operate in a place as what I would like to describe as toothless tigers. You know, we have all the tools and the accoutrements of a tiger, but we may not have necessarily the claws or the teeth to really dig into investigations or police practices. And so that's one of the struggles historically that all civilian review boards have struggled with. But as we see May 2020, with the murder of George Floyd, we saw national and international momentum around police reforms and police accountability and transparency. On a local level, we also here in Philadelphia, we're dealing with issues around police accountability and transparency. Right before the election in November of 2020, right here we had Philadelphia police shot a citizen, Mr. Walter Wallace Jr. here in West Philadelphia after relatives called 911 for assistance with a mental health crisis. So in November of 2020, residents had voted on creating who we are now, which is the Citizens Police Oversight Commission, and gave us legislatively new powers and really re-envision what civilian police oversight was going to look like here in Philadelphia. Also in 2020, these new powers that we have received from the legislation also occurred because of the incidents of 2020 in regards of protests. And what we see here is the Philadelphia Police Department using tear gas to disperse protesters that were walking across a highway here in Philadelphia, a major highway in downtown Philadelphia. However, due to the nature of the architecture of the highway, we see here in these pictures individuals trying to climb up an embankment to escape the tear gas. And because it was a highway and both sections were blocked off, it was really difficult for protesters to lawfully disperse once they were bombarded with this tear gas. So we see here, once again, different acts that occur that really facilitate the need for stronger civilian police oversight. Next slide. And so as we notice here, once again, this is the protest that happened in 2020 at this particular police district where they were protesting the killing of Walter Wallace by the Philadelphia Police Department. This, ironically and unfortunately, is the same neighborhood that the MOVE bombings had occurred in almost 25 years earlier. I'm sorry, probably 35 years earlier. And that type of trauma doesn't necessarily dissipate. Many individuals who were around to see what happened in 1985 were also around to see what happened in 2020 with Mr. Wallace. And so those are the types of issues and concerns that we all as civilian review boards have to deal with on a constant basis. Next slide. Okay, now I'm going to turn it over to Juliana.
Thanks, Damon. Hi, everyone. So now we're going to talk a little bit about our day-to-day operations, our mission, and our role in the city of Philadelphia. So our agency has 4 different units. We have our auditing and monitoring team. They have the power to audit internal affairs investigations once they are completed. Luckily, we're going to start receiving those investigations before they're completed, which is a really big step for our agency. Another amazing thing that unit has done, they have released a report as of last week of some reviews that they did in March of 2022 to June of 2022. It was an amazing report, and we actually did a town hall on that as well. We are able to incorporate monitoring by attending internal affairs interviews with the complainants, and we're able to be there, monitor the situation, and we're also able to ask questions that go on the record. We have a policy and data unit as well. They're able to provide recommendations to different policies and procedures of the department. They also create different explainers that we put on our website with information on just different topics just for our community to read. You'll be learning more about what the community outreach and constituent services team does. And finally, our investigations team. In the future, we hope to have the power to investigate police complaints in our office. In the meantime, we do have the power to go out to the scene of a police-involved shooting, and our investigators are able to receive information from the police department right there, which really helps to find out whether or not the police officer acted within policy or not. We have, aside from our units, we also have a commission of 9 members. They all come from different parts of the city and have various backgrounds, which is extremely important in order to highlight the diversity of our city. Overall, the main goal of both the agency and our commission is to increase transparency and accountability of the police department, improving police conduct, enhancing the quality of internal affairs investigations, and we do that with our auditing and monitoring team, and just overall increasing both communication and engagement between the community and the police department. Next slide. So overall, we take complaints of police misconduct from civilians. These are just a list of some of the frequent allegations that we see. So we can have lack of service, verbal abuse, unprofessional conduct, and these are just some examples like intimidating language, failure to prepare or accurately complete a report, which really affects many victims as they seek services afterwards. So this is just a list of the frequent allegations of misconduct that we see at our office. In my role, so I am tasked with connecting both the Spanish-speaking community here in Philadelphia with the police department and our agency, and just kind of building those bridges. And it's really important to understand that even within the Hispanic community, there's many ethnicities, and they all have their own history when engaging with the police. So it's really important to understand that different communities are going to have different needs. And that's why it's extremely important to connect with local organizations that have ties to that specific group Also understanding the history for many different communities and how they have interacted with the police. And I can just provide an example of my family. So my family is from the Dominican Republic, and over there, many officers have received really low wages. So you may be stopped by a police officer and they could ask you for money in order to let you go. And that's really frustrating. And we see that abuse happen even now in 2024. So it's really hard. And also, there's always been history of abuse and violence. So understanding what has happened in someone's country and what happens once they come here to the United States is important when connecting with them. Connecting with local leaders is crucial because they're able to provide a perspective of what's happening on the ground. They can be very influential when engaging with police and politicians on different policies and solutions. And they can overall just provide guidance to your agency on how to interact with the communities to make sure that you're being respectful and that you are honoring that community in the right way. I also wanted to acknowledge just religion overall. In our city, we have many different religious pockets all over the city, and it's just important to understand the different religious communities and how to interact with them, but also meet with their leaders, have a sit down, build those bridges. Overall, I think it's always important to advocate for cultural sensitivity and awareness training for our police officers. We have seen all across the country that many departments are struggling with recruitment, and you might have an applicant from another city become an officer and might not understand the history of your county, of your town. So it's really important for them to understand the different cultures that exist and embracing that diversity. So now we're going to transition a little bit into our constituent services side. So we may encounter a complainant who may have a police complaint that we take over, but they may have other issues aside. They may have different issues that are not police related. So this is when our constituent services side kicks in and we're able to offer or connect them to different resources. So I'm going to pass it off to my colleague, Julian Jordan.
Thank you, Jeriana. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our constituent services unit. We are a part of the outreach team. This is something that I focus on quite a bit. And in our office, we classify a constituent service request as a request for assistance from the public that doesn't necessarily rise to the level of a complaint. Oftentimes it's folks looking for assistance navigating police services, looking for assistance for other departments such as L&I or the streets department. And as a resident of the city, I understand how frustrating it can be to find the right department for assistance sometimes. And so we try to do our best to help individuals out with whatever request they may have. And as such a new agency, Oversight has been in Philadelphia for quite some time now, as we learned earlier. But in this newest rendition, we are still trying to get the word out for people to know that we are here, we are a resource, and we are able to help not only with instances that you need help with, navigating police services, but also for anything else that we can, really help you with. And that's really important for our office because as such a new agency, we do need to gain the trust of the community. As we know in all of our cities, individuals have trust issues with the police department and with the city government as a whole. And so we really want to drive it home that we are here to help. And so some examples of the constituent service requests that we receive, how do I file or get a copy of a police report? How do I obtain protection from abuse order, access to victim services? Where's my police district? Those kinds of things. We also get a lot of calls for example, folks that have people parking on the sidewalk on their block. They may be in a wheelchair. There may be children on the block. Hey, I've called the police department. I really need help navigating the service. It's not necessarily a complaint, but it's absolutely a valid request for assistance. And so we do everything that we can to help folks. And for our CPOC outreach tip, if you are receiving frequent questions about the same issues or topics, consider putting FAQs on your social media pages or agency website. For me, I think this is a great way that you can, kind of get some content to put out there on social media, especially trying to get young folks involved or people that might not necessarily make it to your website. but they are pretty fluent when it comes to social media. And so this is a great way to answer some of those questions that folks might have before they need to, actually reach out or contact you. Next slide, please. So speaking with community members about challenges accessing police services or understanding a process or policy may put you in the best position to advocate for clearer messaging for the public. It may be helpful to reach out to the police department and suggest changes to a confusing policy, propose better messaging, or work together to provide information to the community and officers about the policy. Some examples of this include, what role do the police play in illegal evictions or lockouts? We also get a lot of calls about illegal evictions and what folks should do. Should they call the police if their landlord puts them out or changes the locks? A lot of times it is the sheriff's department, but we're happy to help to navigate that. And even if like I said earlier, this isn't something that necessarily deals with within our purview, it is nice to be able to be that resource, and folks know that they can come to us for assistance navigating services around the city. What are my rights when legally carrying a firearm? Can you explain what my Miranda rights are? When do they come into play, and what scenario should I be concerned with that? And what information do I need to know before getting into that situation? When do officers have an obligation to turn on body-worn cameras? When I ask for a police supervisor, does one have to be called to the scene? That's one that we get a lot. A lot of times it'll be a complaint. It's an officer in Philadelphia is not necessarily mandated to call a supervisor if need be. It's kind of been a courtesy, but it is something that people tend to expect. And so, that's a question we get quite a bit from the constituent services side of things. And our outreach tip here is, if oversight professionals have trouble understanding a police process, there's a good chance the public also will have questions. It's okay to reach out to law enforcement leadership to ask for clarification, and you can inform the public via social media platforms. This is something we do quite frequently. We might get a question that pops up multiple times, and we, constantly reaching out to the department for clarification on certain things. And we have a great policy unit that will help us to coordinate with our outreach team to come up with explainers when new policies or procedures become available, or when folks need additional clarification on existing policies and procedures. Next slide, please. Thank you. And am I turning it over to Talia?
Yes, you are. Okay, thank you so much, Julian. Good afternoon, everyone. So now we are going to spend some time talking a little bit about the focus of the outreach, training, and education unit. And then we'll talk a little bit more about some of the creative ways that our unit puts together some programming, activities, and messaging for the community. So our unit's responsibilities fall into quite a few categories. And so one is our monthly town hall meetings and discussions. And so each month, our agency hosts community meetings in town halls where we discuss topics that are related to policing and other social justice issues. These monthly discussions provide information to the community about police services or resources from other city departments. We will frequently partner and collaborate with other agencies to bring information to the community about different topics. And the other goal is to provide a safe space to discuss difficult topics, gather community feedback on local and national issues. And so it's really important for us to just provide the public with a place to come and talk about how they're feeling about a particular incident that may have occurred or a particular topic related to policing. And so this is an example of some of the materials that we have distributed to the community about the various town halls that we've had. This is just a few examples, but you can see that we've hosted a law enforcement Know Your Rights panel. And so that was an opportunity for us to really bring together some other city agencies and groups to talk about some rights that the community has. We partnered with the police department for this one, our district attorney's office, the Defenders Association, and the Office of the Victim Advocate. And so we got together in the community, we provided some food, and we talked about people's rights and obligations when interacting with the police, how the district attorney plays a role in policing, what it's like for the Defenders Association when they are providing representation to their clients. Of course, we talked about civilian oversight, and we brought in the Office of the Victims Advocate, which at the time was a newly created city office, to talk about some victims' rights and services. We hosted another town hall in February of last year, and this one specifically was right after the incident with Tyree Nichols. We wanted to talk about policing and the Black community, but specifically about community grief and trauma. And so this town hall discussion really focused on grief and trauma as a community, but we also talked about how seeing these repeated videos that we see on the news and on social media, like what does that do to a community when you are constantly bombarded with these images of harm? You know, and there are certain people that are able to watch some of these things and they can just watch it and just observe. But for some communities, there is a very real heart and soul connection. And so it can be difficult to repeatedly see these things come across your timeline or your feed. And we just really wanted to talk about how that feels as a community and some strategies that people can use if they feel that they are struggling, or just some brief strategies. And so for that event, we had an organization called Black Men Heal. They provide mental health support and resources to the community. We invited one of our local elected officials, Chris Robb was there. And then we also reached out to the police department. And we had some representation from NACOLE, which is the National Organization for Black Law Enforcement. They came and they talked a little bit about what it's like for them being officers of color, who straddle these two worlds of being police officers, but also being people of color and also having to see some of these images. We also, for Black History Month, this February, we hosted a town hall about Black herstory in law enforcement and what it is like for some women of color and what their experience has been like in the department. This was a really great event. We partnered with the executive director for the Nashville Community Oversight Board, Jill Fitchard. She was one of our co-moderators. And it was a chance for us to really just talk to some law enforcement officers, but we also talked to women that were working in oversight to talk about what this experience has been like for them doing this kind of work. We also hosted a national discussion with other members of NACOLE from other agencies about just some trends and things that we are seeing collectively across this country. You know, we were joined by oversight professionals from Atlanta, from Chicago, Nashville, New York, and some representation from NACOLE. And it was an opportunity for us to really just talk about just some things that we all have in common, things that we are seeing, and how we can work together to just improve community police relations on a national level. And so we have an outreach tip here for all of you, which is do not be afraid to have tough conversations. It can be a challenge sometimes because people can get very passionate, or some of these conversations that we have can invoke a lot of emotion, but we should not be afraid to have some of these discussions because all of us know people are talking about them anyway. They are having these conversations with their family members. They're talking about it at home, in school, and at work. And so if you just resign yourself to the fact that these tough conversations have to happen in order for all of us to work together, you can really provide some space for people to give feedback. So our unit is also responsible for most of the community training and education that this agency embarks upon. And so what we do is we often provide trainings to local community organizations about who we are, because as my colleague mentioned before, you know, even though oversight has been around for quite some time, not everybody knows about this agency or what we do or how we can help. And so a lot of our community education is about just introducing ourselves, talking about who we are and what we do, you know, explaining to people what that complaint process looks like. So that they can file a complaint, perhaps on behalf of their clients. You know, sometimes we reach out to different organizations or they contact us because they have clients that have police contact and they want to understand how they can file a complaint if they need to. We educate people on the history of oversight in Philadelphia and also about different police department directives and policies, because we find that, when you educate and empower people to be their own advocate, to be able to speak up for themselves, they really have more power to ask for what they need. And so these kinds of trainings that we do, they are perfect for victims advocacy groups and agencies, other city departments who connect with the same constituency, elected officials and constituent services staff. Oftentimes people may call their elected official first before they reach out to somebody else. So if you can educate them on what you do, they can point people towards you. Civic organizations and grassroots groups, high schools, colleges, and universities. And of course, we often go out to police district meetings, some jurisdictions call them precincts, but different police districts when they have community meetings or the captain's town hall discussions to educate people about what we do. And so there are just a couple pictures here of some of our education and training efforts. And I would like to just really highlight the fact that one of the training opportunities that we are really proud of is the fact that we give an oversight presentation to Philadelphia's Civilian Police Academy. And so this might be something that other cities do, but Philadelphia has a Civilian Police Academy. It is a 9-week program that is sort of loosely patterned after the actual police academy, and it brings together community members to talk about police policy so that they can sort of return to their communities just better informed about how policing works and operates. And so we are a part of that curriculum, and we have an oversight lecture that we give to every Civilian Police Academy class, because usually people that sign up for classes and courses like that are people that are active in the community. And so it's important for us to just introduce ourselves to them so that they can help share information about our agency and what we do. So another thing that our unit is very proud of is the fact that we are a part of the police recruit training curriculum. And so our outreach team, we give an oversight lecture to every single police recruit class before they go to graduation and are assigned to their individual districts. And so this is a training, it's for 2 hours, and we go up to the police academy, we meet with the recruits. And so this training really gives us an opportunity to talk to them, to learn about why they wanted to go into law enforcement. We talk to them about, just what oversight is not, because often, we find that perhaps in law enforcement communities, people have an opinion about what oversight is supposed to do. And we just want to make sure we dispel myths, that we are not there to be divisive. We're not there to, do anything harmful. We really should have the same goal as the police department, which is promoting transparency and accountability. So if you keep that in mind, you understand that you are really working towards the same goal. We talk about ways that our agency may work collaboratively with the police department. We talk about our units, our organizational structure. We give them tips about things to consider when they're interacting with the community. And we talk about our role in the our oversight's role, in the disciplinary process, because Philadelphia, our agency sits on the PBI board, which is a panel that hears allegations of police misconduct. That is a really, really big deal for Philadelphia because civilians previously were not involved in that process. And so CPOC is 1/3 of a panel. We hear allegations of police misconduct, and you were looking for 2 things. The first thing is, was there a policy that prohibited the conduct? And second, did that conduct occur? And so we make a recommendation on discipline that is given to the police commissioner. And so when we're at the police academy, we talk to the recruits about how we play into that process if they ever should go before the disciplinary board. And so one of the ways that we sort of foster some discussion is by showing a film. We show Navajo Police Class 57. It is a documentary that's on HBO. And so this documentary talks about recruit experiences in the Navajo Nation. And it's interesting because there are a lot of similarities that the recruits can see between themselves and the recruits in the documentary. And so it really just gives us a chance to kind of just talk about how here we are in these 2 completely separate worlds, but look at all of the things that are similar. And there's some issues that you may think are just unique to your own city, but look how there are other people that are struggling with some of the same issues and concerns. And so it's been a very interesting and productive opportunity for us to meet the recruits. We have some photos here, and we always leave each class learning more about, the recruits, and they always leave learning a little bit more about CPOC as well. And so, as I'm sure all of you are aware, sort of the bread and butter of any oversight agency is resources, resource tabling, and going out to community events. That is a really, really great chance to meet people, to talk about who you are. If you have some swag, some things you can give away, you use that as a carrot to get people to come over to your table. We always have different handouts that we can give to people. We have handouts that give tips for police interactions. We tell people, take a picture of it, keep it in your wallet. Just reminders that you have the right to remain silent, that you can ask for an attorney, just some things that we want to make sure the community keeps in mind. And so it's something that we do quite often. We love being out in the community, going to different events, talking about who we are, but more importantly, getting to know different people in the city. Our unit also issues officer commendations. And so we find that it is important to acknowledge harm that happens. It's important for us to promote transparency and to call out behavior or misconduct, but it's just as important to acknowledge many of the amazing officers that do a good job each and every day. And so we accept nominations from community members about officers who they feel have provided amazing service, that have gone above and beyond. And so people write into us or they call and they just tell us about the positive experiences that they've had with the police department. And so we put together an award package. And what we do is we go to roll call or we go to the assigned unit location that the officer may be at. And we just talk a little bit about the incident itself. And we give a letter to the police commissioner, just outlining the incident and how the officer did such a great job. We give them an award certificate. We include a little CPOC swag just as a thank you. There is sort of a nominal gift card included just so they can get a cup of coffee or something like that if they want to, just as an acknowledgement of a job well done. And so doing this really provides some balance because we really like to explain to people that we're just not here to take complaints. If you have great interactions, we want to hear about those as well. And so this is just a few pictures of us just giving out some of our commendations. We often get phone calls about many of the great officers that are out there, and it's really our pleasure to make sure that we say thank you and highlight that great work. Okay, so we're talking a little bit about just engaging with community members in ways that go beyond just talking about the police department. Because really, it is really important for you to, if you want to be seen as a trusted partner and a trusted friend, you have to be present in a community. And sometimes before you go, with your hand out, asking people to share their experiences with you and tell you how they feel. You have to show yourself as a trusted ally and friend. And so one way to do that is really to get out there in the community and just provide spaces to talk about different things, to be present when other agencies and groups are having things, even if it has nothing to do with the police department, so that people believe that you are coming in good faith because you really care about things that are going on that may not align with your particular agency's mission. And so these are just a few examples of some of the things that we've done. We host community movie nights and film discussions. We have recognized and celebrated some of the work of our stakeholders. We do some national and international relationship building. We support the work of interfaith groups. We go to have resource drives providing items that are critical to stakeholder efforts, and we sponsor some youth-led activities that may happen locally. So I'll just give you a few examples. As you can see here, we hosted a community movie night, and this was actually during Pride Month. The documentary is called My Name is Paulie Murray. If you have not seen it, I recommend it highly to all of you. Paulie Murray was a individual who was very, very instrumental in mentoring Ruth Bader Ginsburg. A lot of their arguments were used for the Brown versus Board of Education case. And so Paulie was one of the co-founders of the National Organization for Women. And so this Paulie was just an amazing person that really contributed to a lot of the rights that all of us have today. And so we wanted to just have a movie night, talk about their legacy, come together with some community members and just have a good community discussion. And so that event, we partnered with Philly Black Pride, the Colors Organization, Morris Home, a few other groups, just to spend some time watching a nice film, having some food, and talking a little bit. For Women's History Month, we asked the community members to nominate some women in their community that they felt were just doing a great job so that we could highlight some of the amazing women in our city that are working every day for the community. And so we asked for nominations for people that were advocates, that worked in oversight, that did community healing or DEI work. And we got quite a few names, and we were able to have a nice town hall where we got an opportunity to hear more about their work. We took them a little gift package just to say thank you for everything you're doing in the city. And so it was just good to kind of give people a pat on the back and a boost for the work that they're already doing. We hosted a town hall. This one was called Mothers Committed to Change. And so this was during the month of May for Mother's Day. We wanted to talk to some mothers who were working as change agents. And so we got together with Mothers in Charge, that's an organization in Philadelphia that works for to advocate for parents who have lost children to gun violence. And we reached out to a friend in Chicago who has an organization called MASK, Mothers Against Senseless Killing and Men Against Senseless Killings. And so we just wanted to talk to just some ways that mothers are able to just be change agents in their community. And we also had a young lady named Charito Morales. She started a group called Philly Boricuas. And so she does a lot of advocacy work in the Kensington area. And so she joined us as well to talk about her efforts. One of the things that our agency does is we participate in the Mandela Washington Fellowship Program. This is a program that brings together African professionals, and they partner them with agencies and groups in the US to help people get some professional development. And so we have been doing this every year for quite a few years now. And so they assign you a fellow. You are responsible for their entire month of activity. So they come to your city, they're here in the office. And so we take the time to, expose them to our agency, what we do. We take them with us to different events. We set up different trainings and discussions. We always request a fellow that has work that aligns with, policing or oversight. So, for example, last year, our fellow was a psychologist from Namibia. He wanted to create a mental health program for first responders. And so he came and was with us for the whole month. The year before that, we were joined by a woman who is a police officer from Madagascar. She's interested in building up community police relations. So she was with us the previous year for the month, and we were able to really talk to her about the work that she does in Madagascar and what we do. This year, we will be joined by a fellow from the Seychelles Islands. She is a forensic psychologist, the only forensic psychologist in her country. And so she's coming because she's also a sworn officer and she wants to learn more about what we do. We have the 19th District in Philadelphia. They hosted a youth pop-up shop. And so basically this was a chance for some young people who are entrepreneurs to come together and sell, some of their products and things that they have. And so what we did was we found out how much it costs for each of those young people to have a table. There was a vendor fee. And so CPOC just covered the cost for all of those young people to be able to participate in this program because we did not want cost to be a barrier to any young person getting some exposure for their business. We also hosted a resource drive for some domestic violence and trafficking agencies in the city so that we could get a list of some things that their clients were in need of. We had some different drop-off locations and people were able to donate things so that we could just take them to some of these agencies just to be a support to the work that they're doing. And then we do fun stuff. We've done, a couple movie nights where it's just aimed at kids. It's just an opportunity to provide a fun space for people to come that's positive, provide a movie, some popcorn, And so we often do that. And as you can see, recently we just showed the Transformers movie, Rise of the Beasts. So there oftentimes can be barriers to doing some engagement that moves beyond just the scope of your mission as an agency. So we did want to talk a little bit about what some of those barriers could be and potentially some ways to overcome some of that. And so, we all know that we do similar work, but there are no two agencies that are identical. And each of us have unique challenges and unique strengths. And so there can be issues for all of us. Some of us may have concerns with staff size. Maybe you have a very small staff. It may just be you or just you and maybe 2 or 3 other people. So perhaps your capacity for impact is less than you would like it to be. There could be a concern with funding. Maybe you have great ideas, but you really just don't have enough money to kind of get things done the way you would like to. Perhaps your authority, is given by just legislation so that any decisions that you may have, maybe they have to go through a long process or somebody else are making the decision. So you may have great ideas, but they may not necessarily be yours to implement. You may have to go through some other channels to get things done. You may there's a concern with the relationship with local law enforcement. It could be that law enforcement may be reluctant to work with you. They're skeptical about your motives. They don't know what, your motives may be. So maybe they're reluctant to work with you in some ways. And of course, there's the relationship with the community that can sometimes be a barrier to some of these ideas that you may have, because there could be previous broken promises to the public. We always have to wrestle with some of the historical harms that have happened. And so sometimes community members are just maybe reluctant to believe that things can change based on their lived experience with law enforcement. If your agency is new or too small, that can also hinder the process. Maybe people don't know who you are, what you do. And so really being able to make a connection can be somewhat difficult. And so just some problem solving strategies. We just have a couple of suggestions here, some things that we think you should consider. One of those things is partner, partner, partner. And so oversight agencies who happen to be small may benefit from partnering with other groups or other organizations with a similar mission or who service the same constituency. And so it can be helpful to pool your resources. Okay, you get together and say, okay, this is what we can take care of. This is what you can take care of. That way you can pool what you have, and that can allow you to be a little bit more effective. And of course, when you partner, it can prevent burnout because you are sharing the load with another group. And so what this can look like is, for example, perhaps for Domestic Violence Awareness Month, you want to reach out to a domestic violence advocacy group, or maybe your local police district to hold a virtual town hall discussion or in-person conversation about domestic violence. And so if you wanted to have an even bigger impact and go beyond just having a conversation, you could reach out to a local shelter. Perhaps you can get information about maybe the number of school-age children that they have at that shelter, and then pool your resources with your partners to go out, and maybe you could purchase some school supplies. And so you could take it to the shelter and just make a donation. That way you are connecting with them to talk about the issues that concern them, but meeting a very real critical need. And you're sharing the cost with other groups. Gather feedback, gauge interest, then go. Okay, so if your decisions on some of your outreach efforts are not yours alone to make, you have to factor in other people or other individuals make the determining decision for you. Perhaps it would be a good idea to sort of inquire about what the priorities of the group are. You can find out what issues seem to be the most critical and what requires your immediate attention. And so sometimes it's easier to get buy-in from those in authority when they have a stake in what you're doing and when they feel like they are part of the planning and a part of that process. And so what this can look like for you is maybe reviewing some frequently asked questions that come up at your oversight meetings, some of your discussions that you've had with the community, look at some of your complaint data to create better tools or resources to educate the community about a persistent issue that you may see pretty frequently. And you could work together to create some community messaging or infographics to explain what that process looks like. And if you want to have a bigger impact, what you can do is post those graphics on your social media so people can share them, comment on them, and then print some out, keep them so that you can pass them out at your tabled events. Because if people don't see it on social media, they may see it when they see you in person. Acknowledge the elephant in the room. Okay, so we know that oftentimes, getting community members to be open to trusting oversight agencies can be challenging. We already talked about, some of the historical barriers and the possibility that people don't know who you are. But one way to address some of what's going on and how the community may feel is to just be honest and open about the fact that there are different opinions that exist, and provide some spaces for people to get together to talk about it. So this can look like hosting listening sessions with community members and law enforcement to hear about the challenges they may have, and really get feedback on what they think is important for oversight to prioritize. Because when people feel like they are a part of what's going on, they really participate a little bit more. You can connect with local organizations that advocate for marginalized communities and ask if they would be willing to work with you, or encourage their constituents to share their thoughts. One way to do this is not necessarily to just send out a blast invitation to an event. Maybe you want to make a personal connection. You want to make a phone call. You want to send an email. You want to do a direct invitation to ask someone, listen, I know that this agency that you have focuses on this, this, and this. We're having this event. Will you come and join us? We need you to talk about these two topics. We want to hear from you. So if you want to have a bigger impact, what you can do is perhaps you want to host 2 separate listening sessions, one for civilians and one for law enforcement, because sometimes this can create just a little bit of an easier way to kind of navigate some of the conversations that may come up. Sometimes if you have people that are undocumented, people that have been justice involved, that have had contact with the police department, they may not be willing to attend something if officers are there. And so just same thing, if you want to talk to police officers about maybe their perspective, maybe you want to have just a space for them so that they feel like they can say how they feel, maybe without the community present. And then maybe you have a joint one with everyone. But if you have a joint discussion, what you can do is maybe you want to ask the police, if you come, can you bring some officers that are just in plain clothes? Because that uniform sometimes can create a barrier. And so that's just another way to kind of have some of these difficult conversations in a way that makes people more comfortable. You want to use the tools you already have in your toolbox. Please, please, please do not reinvent the wheel. Before you go in a community to engage, do a little bit of research first. Identify who those credible messengers are, who are some of those community people that are already doing a lot of the heavy lifting and a lot of the work. You want to introduce yourself to them. You want to ask, what are they already doing and how can you support what's already happening? Community members may already be more familiar with them than they are with you. And so when you do that, these other people or agencies, they may have already established and built up some trust with the people that you're trying to build a connection with. And so you have to understand that sometimes every message is not most appropriately given by you. Sometimes there's someone else that is a better person to deliver a message. And so if you identify that and understand that, you can really utilize a lot of the people that are already doing some really great work. And so what this could look like is you may want to reach out to some of your local elected officials to identify organizations that they know in their district that they're already working with. You may want to reach out to, places of worship and other community leaders that you know. In doing this is we're just telling the truth here. It can prevent, you offending someone who may already be doing a certain type of engagement before you got there, so you definitely want to just acknowledge that there are people that are already kind of doing some of this work and you want to find out how you can help. And so if you want to have a bigger impact, once you identify who these credible messengers are, maybe ask them first, what do they think are the most critical needs for the community? Because they may have more information than you. This will show that you, number one, value their opinion, you respect the place that they hold in the community, and they can be a better potential partner for you in the future. You want to make sure that you talk to communities who are often left out of oversight conversations. That is very, very important to do. You want to connect with communities that may experience a high amount of police contact, but are not typically consulted when oversight discussions take place. I cannot stress that enough. You know, when we talk about people that are returning to the community or formerly incarcerated, they have different rights and different responsibilities sometimes than some other people. So if you want to engage with them, you know, you have to sort of see things from their perspective. Marginalized groups, other communities may have unique challenges that deserve just as much attention as anything else. And so what this can look like is, you know, connecting with maybe agencies or groups that serve as unhoused residents. You may want to talk to probation officers or reentry specialists and maybe consulates from abroad, from other countries, you know, to learn about their work and identify ways that you can educate their clients on law enforcement policies or how they file complaints. We have made a connection with, you know, the Mexican consulate in Philadelphia, and we're hoping to do that more with others, just so that they know what the complaint process looks like, so that if any of their citizens come to Philly and have some interactions with the police, what do they do if they're the victim? What do they do if they want to file a complaint? How do they file a police report? It's important to kind of get the word out to some of these other places that people don't often think to tap into. And so if you want to have a really big impact, you can host or help organize a Know Your Rights discussion to inform residents about their rights when interacting with law enforcement. And as we stated a little bit earlier, this can really empower people to be their own advocate and report misconduct when it takes place. So we didn't just want to talk to you and not leave you with some suggested initiatives or events or activities that you could potentially put together in your community. So we just have a couple of examples here. One could be maybe you want to organize an interfaith or business corridor quarterly check-in. So this could look like you reaching out to places of worship, maybe your police chaplains, other members of law enforcement, some business corridors, business owners, and business associations. Maybe you want to meet with them every quarter. And so this will give them a chance to discuss some of their concerns, some of their safety issues that they're having. You can invite local law enforcement to give presentations or help brainstorm solutions. And to boost interest, maybe you want to ask those faith leaders if they will host the meeting at their places of worship so that you can really tap into maybe their membership and they can feel like they really do have a stake in what you're doing because they are the host. You could possibly have a social media youth discussion. You know, you want to connect with some of your local elementary and high school, to talk about social media and some of the pitfalls and power that social media has. You can invite parents, you know, school staff members, guardians. Maybe you want to talk about, you know, online bullying, internet safety. Many of us know that, you know, some of the stuff that happens in social media with our young people often spills over into the classroom. And so you can maybe have some law enforcement people come in and talk about the consequences of online harassment or bullying. Maybe you want to have some representation from a local college come and join you, and they can talk to these young people about how what you post online can impact how you get in, whether or not you get into a college, and how you may appear to potential higher education. And so that's an opportunity to just kind of talk a little bit about things with kids on their level and really give them some tips about how they can conduct themselves online. Another thing that could really be beneficial to do is to boost oversight as a career choice. I don't know what your experience has been, but this career that we are in, it never occurred to me that this was a possibility when I was younger, and even when I was just, you know, moving through the working world. And so when you're thinking about career options and growing fields, oversight is not one that people usually think of, you know, but most of us know that we are seeing more and more how important this work is and how attractive it is for lots of people to come and do this type of work. And it is something that a variety of academic disciplines can partake in. So, you know, if you hear about a local career fair or something like that, don't shy away from attending those kinds of events, because that is how you attract new talent. That is how you, you know, get the word out about this as a career choice. If you are small, maybe you don't have any open positions, maybe you want to contact the college and maybe go to one of their internship fairs, because you can generate some interest from young people there and provide some maybe unpaid internships to get some candidacy. So just, I want to thank everybody for logging on, for registering for this event, for joining us for this webinar. It's been great to really talk to you about some of the things Philadelphia is doing. Thank you to my colleagues who helped do this wonderful presentation. And so if anyone wants to keep in touch with us, our information is here. We are open, to having any conversations with anyone. You want to call us, send an email, reach out to us. We're on social media, and we can also take some Q&A if people have questions. But thank you so much for this space. Thank you to NACOLE for having us as well.
Thank you, Talia, Damon, Julian, and Giriana. And this wonderful panel that works so well together. As you all were presenting, your fellow panelists were responding to the questions that were being posted. And so for everyone in the audience, I did check, and I can download the Q&A chat, the text. And so when I send the follow-up email, I will send those out with so you all can have a copy of those as well, in addition to access to the recording of the video. So, but just know all the questions were answered. And I just wanted to follow up on, someone asked about not having a budget. I work with a lot of smaller communities all over the country that have that concern. Well, what can we do if we don't have the staffing, and we don't even have an office outside of the volunteers, and we don't even have a budget? And so whenever we talk about ideas about and share what other cities and organizations are doing, we talk about scalability. So no, if you're a small city, small volunteer board, and you don't even have oversight staff, of course you can't do everything that was just presented, but hopefully it triggered some ideas about what you might be able to do, or some forum that you're not currently doing, even if it's just a forum that's once a year, because that's all that you all resource-wise can do. I love the idea of having the resources available, or discussing the resources, even like the movie night, things that are outside the box, that would really be a draw to the community. So think in terms of scaling. What could you do? Maybe not a monthly forum, but maybe a forum once a year or every 2 years. And so just think of it in those terms. Let's see. So thank you all. We are going to still jump over to the post-webinar meeting. We still got some time for that. So if anyone would like to join us for that, I have dropped in the link to that meeting in the chat for everyone. And so feel free, host and panelists. Let me drop that in again for the entire audience again. Just know, until I log off of this webinar, you'll be in a waiting room for that, because it's the same account that we're using to log on. I did want to just make a couple of announcements. Those of you who joined us today, thank you so much. For those of you who will join us in the discussion room, we'll see you there in a few minutes. If you're not able to, or don't plan on joining us in that discussion room, I do thank you for your attention and your time and being here with us today. And just want to make a couple of announcements. The first one, our next webinar is open for registration. It's on the NACOLE website. It is scheduled for August the 2nd, and it's about subcultures in policing, and it's the significance of that to oversight. Our annual conference registration is underway. Early registration ends on August the 2nd. And also, we're accepting nominations for 2 NACOLE awards that are bestowed upon the chosen recipients each year at the annual conference. So if you have anybody that you would like to submit a nomination for someone to receive one of those awards, please go to the website. All the information is there, as well as the nomination, link to the nomination form. And then I believe that is it. So Talia, Damon, Juliana, Geriana, thank you again so much. And I will jump over to the discussion room with you all in a few minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hold on a minute or so, just so in case anybody is trying to get that chat link, the discussion link. So see you in a few. Do you have it, Talia?
I think, so if I just click on it, will it automatically take me to the next meeting? Okay,
Yep. You
all
should
right,
just.
I think I got it.
For me. And then I'm joining right after you click.
All right, looks like it's letting me in.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm leaving the webinar and I will see you in a moment.